Welcome to the Perkins Center for Preaching Excellence series, Classic Must Reads. Today we're going to be talking about Saved from Silence, written by Mary Turner and Mary Lin Hudson. It's published in 1999 by Chalice Press, a very important book in our field. So thank you two for being with me today.
We appreciate, Wes, the acknowledgement of Saved from Silence and whatever contributions it may have made to the field of homiletics. We are really grateful.
Well, so it was published in 1999, so I assume it's a few years before that the two of you began your collaboration. What is it that led you at that moment to write this book?
Well, both of us had begun teaching homiletics in our various institutions. And what we discovered quickly was that there were students who came into seminary without a sense of confidence in themselves as preachers. Many of those were women. They would say things like, "Oh, I'm going to be a chaplain or an associate pastor, but I'll never preach." And then we would get them into preaching and try to help them find their own authority. This was a challenge, especially for some women who would stand up to speak and they barely even had a voice in the pulpit. And so we thought, somebody needs to address this. We need to find out what's really going on here and see if we can help these people.
Well, I think the book really broke some new ground there. And you've named one influence you've had, actually helping women find their voice in the classroom. We still experience that today. I still see women in my class who do that. What influence do you think the book has had in its over 20 years of being out now?
Let me say we started writing the volume in 1993, and we had only had a few years of teaching. And we wanted to find the issues that were the underlying issues that were undermining this finding of voice. And we wanted to do it in a sort of interdisciplinary fashion. We wanted to look at voice, the finding of voice, the metaphor of voice, from the perspective of biblical studies, from theology and history, from psychology and cultural studies and gender studies, because we wanted, I think bottom line, we wanted to be better teachers. We just wanted to explore this issue and think about the implications of that for the academy, for all of us who were teachers of preaching.
I can personally, and I'll come back to you, Mary. I'll just speak personally as a male in this field. The book's very helpful to me teaching women. So it's had that influence over the years that I've been teaching. Mary Lynn, you were going to say something. Sorry about that.
As we began to work on the book and explore biblical, theological, and historical aspects of this theme, we discovered something interesting, that our concern evolved from pedagogical issues to theological ones. And so what we realized, we were uncovering an emerging theology of voice for preaching. Up until this time, we had so many homiletics that were focused on word and how to structure or sermons or use language in sermons, but they hadn't dealt with the incarnational issue of how you embody the presence of God in the pulpit and how your voice reflects that. And so what happened was, we realized then that Saved from Silence was leading to a new theology of voice for preaching, and how important that is in the covenant relationship that God has with us and that we have with God and one another, that our voices are what really matter.
I think that the way you use voice as a term and defined it has now become sort of standard in our guild in the way we teach it. So in the same way sort of Buttrick's talk about moves has become standard language, even if we don't use the exact same way. It's hard to imagine a preaching class anywhere taught where somebody doesn't talk about finding your voice in one way or another. So here we are 21, 22 years later. What do you see as the continuing value of this book at this point?
I think the continuing value stems from what Mary Lynn just said, which is the language that comes from Saved from Silence that now is sort of used uniformly in the teaching of preaching. I think the theology of the preaching voice, we very quickly moved from a theology of the word, which can, but doesn't always, but can imply a sort of static, rigid, monolithic understanding of the Word of God, to the theology of voice, which is just more dynamic, and it's contextual, and it arises out of the conversation of a diverse group of voices with the Word, that brings forth a sort of multiplicity of meaning. You move from the canon being a slate of norms to the canon being this model of struggle and of emerging vision that, with the leadership of the Holy Spirit, brings really something transformational.
Besides,
Go ahead.
women still struggle.
Yes, they do.
In this world today. Let's just face it, that around this globe, we can see evidence of misogyny at work, and that women, even though it may be in subtle ways for women, they find themselves in institutions that they are charged to lead that still have undercurrents of oppression where their voices are not valued fully. And so this book still helps people recognize that if they don't see the oppression of voices from the margins, they aren't paying attention.
You know, most seminaries probably that are mainline now have close to 50% male, 50% female. And yet, as you said, still women who come into my classes say, I'm going to be a chaplain, I'm going to be a deacon, I'm going to be so-and-so. And then, like you said, often though, once they find the power of the pulpit, they're very interested in it and they find their voice. But that doesn't mean the church out there is still willing and anxious to hear it as they ought to be.
It's not a solved problem.
I'm sorry, go on, Mary.
It's not a solved problem. But we came to understand, once we embraced this theology of voice, that the teacher of preaching who embraced a theology of voice, first of all, would understand the nature of contextuality and the importance of a person in our class finding voice in the context in which he or she was going to preach. And we understood that the professor of homiletics who embraced a theology of voice would work hard to stimulate or create the confidence of the preacher to bring a distinctive and contextualized authoritative word, which many women in our class did not believe they could. But I also think that the professor of homiletics, who embraces a theology of voice for preaching, sees the students, the class, and the professor as a community working hard to draw voice out of the students in that class, and, as Nell Morton used to say, would work to hear each other into speech.
Very nice. So again, 22 years later, is there something you would change if you were revising the book? How has your thinking changed at all since you wrote it back then, or since you started in 1993 on the project?
Yes, we've done a lot of thinking about what we might need to change if we were writing it today.
It's hard to believe that we started this 28 years ago, and it was published 23, actually finished it 23 years ago. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And so many current events or events have occurred that illustrate the importance of voice. And it's shaped the church's response in many ways so that the church now feels a sense of urgency for the salvation of the world and its voices. It's much more conscious of pluralism and its importance. My awareness has changed because I now think of people's lives in terms of intersectionality, so that I would not presume to speak for one gender apart from looking at the whole context. And so that's one thing. We made an effort knowing that when we wrote, we were two white feminists. And so we tried to include voices of women in other social locations so that our conversation could be broadened. And I think we had some success there, but not enough. Mm. The other is that I think this is very relevant to the experience of the LGBTQIA community, especially now in some churches. And so I think we would expand and broaden to include their voices more intentionally in this conversation. It's important to celebrate all of these voices and show their value in preaching.
Thank you so much for that. I you know, it is a changing world, but I think this is a book, I just want to say, that I think holds up while we, you know, when I read my old work, it's just like, oh my gosh, I wish this was off the shelves. So yours is not that way at all. So I really appreciate both your willingness to talk with me, but I just want to thank you for the book. And I appreciate your voices. So thank you for taking time to be with us today. And so I'd encourage everyone who's watching to go out and get a copy of Saved from Silence. You can still get it at Amazon and other book dealers. And look for all the books on voice and women's issues and preaching that have come up in the wake of this. So thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary Lynn, for being with us.
Thank you, Wes, for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.